It's like we're celebrities or something.
Yay, yeah, thanks for coming, guys. So here we are. I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna talk to each other for a little while, and then, you know, I don't know, but like, once it gets boring, then we'll start doing some questions from the audience, and if you want to do questions, those are the mics where you guys can line up. So...
You mean I can't be boring from the get-go?
Yeah, we could probably find a way, right? If anyone saw me on Thursday, this is a different shirt. It's just a similar shirt. I realized that when I looked in the mirror this morning, I was like, that's just a different shirt, but it looks like the other shirt. So yeah, different shirt. Anything important to get out of the way at the start?
No, I don't think so. I can tell my story though.
Yeah, tell your story.
See, I grew up in Nebraska, right? And in Nebraska, for whatever reason, I never knew any other Brandons. Brandon was like the unique name, right? And I thought, oh, my parents came up with this cool name. Little did I know that it's like a total Mormon name or something. I don't know. I came to BYU and there were 3 in my hall, right? So all this time I've been thinking, I'm going to break in, I'm going to be a big author, I'll be the only Brandon. And then I start writing, I break in, and people start showing up in my line with these Fablehaven books. No, seriously, they would get us mixed up all the time, particularly at the beginnings of our careers. We broke in around the same time. I think you were a little before me. And
2006 was me.
Okay, 2005. So it was about...
You were a little before me.
Yeah. And people just start showing up in the lines to me, and I'd be like, I'm not that Brandon. And lo and behold, his books are illustrated by another Brandon. So there's 3 of us, and he lives like a block away from me. It's a little bit longer than that, but yeah, it's crazy. So here we are, the 2 Brandons. We do end up signing each other's books. Do you end up doing that very often?
Yeah, people will come to me with Sanderson books, and I'll be like, mine are a little shorter. Like, Sanderson's, you can use Sanderson's as a weapon. I think his goal is to eventually write a book that's a pure cube. Words of Radiance is close.
I'm getting there. It's got to be as high as it is.
Yeah, it's darn close. Another bad thing with Brandon is, here's what happened. I was watching Galaxy Quest. Do you know that movie? And like, there's that kid that wants it all to be real, and he's kind of nerdy about it, and he wants it all to be real, and guess what his name was? Brandon. And when I saw that, I was like, oh man, they're on to me. You know, of course they named that guy Brandon. Because, yeah, it's weird. I think it's our generation. Like, there's a lot of Brandons about our age, and then they trickle off a little bit more. Like, as I sign books, I don't get as many Brandons.
Yeah, we ruined it.
Yeah, I think we did ruin it, right?
You know, the thing is, and it's really weird because kids, right? Kids make this association, like, they'll be waiting in my line, their parents will be waiting in my line for years, and the parents would hand me a book, and I'd look at the kid and say, oh, and what's your name? And they'd say their name, and they'd say, do you know Brandon Mull? Is what they want to know. And it's because we have the same first name and they don't make the connection that, you know, they think we're related. But the weird thing is they actually do know Brandon Mull. He's the other famous Brandon writer. And so it's weird. I'm like teaching them the wrong thing. If you have the same first name, you must know each other. That's what they want to know, if I know Brandon Mull.
Yeah, it's a safe assumption. Everyone should make that assumption. Especially if you know someone named Joe.
Yeah.
They all know each other. So, Brandon, let's talk about some fantasy. So I prepared some nerdy questions we can talk about.
You prepared? Man.
Yeah, and even in like a fantasy-looking book, you know, a little tome bound together. What makes you read fantasy, man? What makes you read fantasy?
So,
what do you like about reading fantasy? Yeah.
Fantasy is awesome, right? Fantasy is the language of imagination, is what I like to say. And what I read fantasy for is a sense of wonder. The cool thing, here's the great thing about fantasy. Fantasy as a genre, it's not bounded like a lot of genres are. If you say some genres, you can say, okay, this is romance novel, and you kind of know what that is. Fantasy, at least at its core, you can't really know what it is because there are great fantasy novels that are romantic fiction, that are a romance novel plus fantasy elements. There are detective stories plus fantasy elements. That makes it fantasy. As soon as you include something weird in your story, it's ours now, right?
once you break the rules of reality, we claim it.
Then we claim it. And so, really, fantasy is just this huge, enormous thing where we stuff everything that does stuff that's awesome. And so, when people ask me, like, I was interviewed by the New York Times a week or two ago, and they're like, so why fantasy? And my response is, well, I can do in fantasy anything I can do in any other genre, plus I can have dragons. So why not?
I love how fantasy can transport me someplace that does not exist and is not real and is better and stranger than our real world. And then try to watch realistic characters face larger than life problems, and to me that's my happy place, and that's why I write it, that's why I read it.
Yeah, when I read, there's this extra element to the fantasy book, and as I said, you know, I always talk about you gotta have great characters, no matter what, right? I've gotta have great characters in a story. That's what's gonna pull me through a story. But if I have a boring world, I'm gonna get bored. I wanna have new things to explore. I want to take those great characters and I wanna force them to live in a place that's interesting. Because, I don't know, when you guys may have read my middle grade series, where I have a guy named Alcatraz who makes fun of the fact that in kids' books, hey, there's some Alcatraz fans. There's some kids' books that always have like pet dogs, and then the pet dog dies. These dead dog books. And that's a real story from my life. When I was growing up, people kept handing me these books and saying, you should like this book. And then there's a dog, and the dog died, and the kid got over it, and that was the book. And these books just bored me. I just hated these books. I'm like, every book is about a dog dying. And I just couldn't do it. Except Tolkien. They tried to give me Tolkien. Tolkien was actually too hard for me at that age, and Gandalf died, and he's kind of like the dog, I guess. But I couldn't actually get through all of Fellowship of the Rings because it was just too hard for me. I wasn't a good reader, and so I just figured everything was boring, reading-wise. It wasn't until I was a little bit older and until I was handed the right book that captured my imagination that this all took off.
What was that book?
It was called Dragonsbane by Barbara Hambley.
Cool, and then it got you into a dragony place and made you happy. This makes me glad. For me, it was Narnia. Narnia was
Yours is a little bit better known than mine.
Yeah, but it showed me what you could do with the story that I had no idea that it was possible. Because you're right, sometimes you read a book and it's just they introduce the dog and you know, okay, this is a time bomb.
Right. And sometimes it is the mom in those books.
It could be the mom.
Yeah. Just point that out. So be forewarned.
Kids, people die.
Yeah.
And also, but it's cooler if they die by dragon fire.
Yeah.
Right?
I'd rather get eaten by a dragon.
Give me this. Do you, okay, if you could visit one of the settings you have created, if you could go as a tourist to one of your settings, where would you go and why?
Oh, wow.
And you won't get killed.
And okay, good.
+5, armor of dragon scales.
I'm sitting here thinking about this because we tell stories about intersections of conflict, right? Things are always going wrong. That's when the stories exist.
Yes.
And so stuff tends to be kind of awful about the time where I'm writing a story. Which world would I go to? You go first.
You'd have to check the CIA website before you went there, right?
Yeah, what would you go to? I'll think about it.
Okay, if I could go someplace, if I could pick, of all my stuff, I think I would probably go to, I guess I'd just go to Fablehaven, because I would have the Hugo Golem guy be my bodyguard.
Right, and you'd still have internet.
Yeah,
right? That's the thing. Going to my world, you don't have internet anymore. Going to yours, you have, you know, flush toilets. My worlds are a little. I'd probably.
Before you go to Sanderson worlds, get all your shots.
Get all your shots. Yeah. I'd probably go to Scadrill. I'd like to be a Mistborn. Maybe I could pull that off.
I sometimes think about that, like where would I want to see if I could see it?
Right.
It's tough. It's nerdy, but
I do get the question, which powers would I pick? And I usually pick Mistborn just because the whole idea of jumping around and pushing on metal and stuff in our modern society, if I could transport that here, that would be awesome.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I did read Mistborn, and I think I could live with that.
Yeah. You could live with superpowers, that'd be okay.
I could live with some of those superpowers, yeah. So here's what a funny thing about, let's talk about the nerd side for a minute of fantasy, okay? Because I was walking into Comic-Con, and one of the conversations that I heard behind me made me, it almost like underlined the kind of shift in the whole nerd culture that's been going on. And you know, this is a well-documented shift, but here's the conversation I heard. I heard like, yeah, she plays video games, but she's not really a nerd. like it was a really cool club they could get into if they were nerdy enough.
Oh yeah, she wasn't nerdy enough to join the club? Okay.
And then the other girl was like, well, I had a dream that I gave birth to Superman. Like, as proof.
Okay.
You know?
Okay.
And I was like, so when do you think it became a cool club to be in, to be a nerd? Like, where did that, because when I was in high school, and I like had my Dragonlance book in my hand, and I liked my nerdy stuff, I kind of like sort of hid the cover, you know what I mean? Because I wasn't so sure how it would fly with the other kids. And now it's not so bad. So
it's been a lot of things. That's a great question. There's a lot of things that have come together. I think one of them is that in our kind of tech-dominated society, like before the 80s really, tech didn't dominate. And it started to then, now tech dominates. If you want a real solid job, you go into computers, right? And the people who kind of are the big media mogul celebrities that are, you know, money-wise and stuff, they're people like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and things like this. And so that's part of it. And I would say also that now that special effects have caught up a little bit to our imaginations, you know, my editor, he's Fan with a capital F, right? F-A-N, capital F. These are the people that, in the old days, pre-Facebook and internet, right? They had to start conventions in order to meet other fans. They were like this small-knit group. They started, you know, the Hugo Awards and all of these things. They started meeting because most people they wouldn't know, that most people they knew had no idea about the science fiction fantasy stuff. It was underground. And he always calls everyone else mundanes. That's his word. They're the fans and they're the mundanes. And he would say, well, the mundanes can now see a bit of what's in our imaginations because of the special effects, and now they can say, oh, that is cool. Like, you know, I got my mother to go to the Lord of the Rings movies. My mother, I love her. She's a mundane. She would accept that. She's an accountant. Normal is good to my mother, right? But I got her to the Lord of the Rings movies where I could never get her to read the books. And she got to watch these movies, and, you know, the action didn't appeal to her, but I tell you, what she loved was Little Smeagol. Right? Little Smeagol. Like, she thought she was going to go, and she's like, oh, there's Aragorn and the elf princess. That's going to be the cool thing I love. But, you know, what she ended up loving was Little Smeagol. And during that last film, you could hear her next to me saying, no, Smeagol, no! No, Smeagol!
Bad Smeagol.
Bad Smeagol. And that story, once she could, you know, the thing about fantasy and science fiction books is there's this thing we call the learning curve, where when you pick it up, there's all new names and all new worlds. And my mother's a very smart individual, but that learning curve, that imaginative learning curve, was not a bump she could get over. But when the film presented it to her, she could get over that very easily and then connect deeply with the characters and see the power of what a science fiction fantasy comic book property can do by having these extraordinary settings with these very powerful characters. And she could connect just like I had when I finally read Lord of the Rings when I was 18. And we got to share that. And I loved that media. You know, sometimes people say, oh, now it's popular. Oh, now they're taking everything and making the films. And there's a bit of that to me too. I mean, I am a hardcore nerd from the old days, so I'm like, this was ours. But the fact that I can connect with my mother over Gollum is something that I never thought possible. And it's the fact that, you know, cinema has caught up to this that has made it possible. So the majority of me appreciates this because of the things it can do in bringing this imagination to other people.
Yeah, so film mainstreamed it. Yeah, you can clap for that, that's good. That was a good explanation. I think film did make it way easier to buy in ways. It just made it an easier get.
Yeah.
And so they're like, you know, like the jocks watch Lord of the Rings, and they're like, okay, that's pretty cool. Let's go get them out of the lockers. You know what I mean? Like, we'll let you play with us now.
Do they still do that? Do they still do that?
According to Richard Paul Evans,
yeah,
they do.
Richard Paul Evans, they still the stuff in the lockers. I never got stuff in lockers. I'm a big guy.
Yeah, I'm big too. Yeah,
yeah,
I don't fit either.
I don't think.
I was a big lumbering nerd. So leave that guy alone.
No, my school actually, there was no bullying and stuff. It was actually pretty cool. It was really weird. I went to a junior-senior high school. It was the 7th through 12th graders, which was really bizarre. But you then have like the seniors who look at the 7th graders, and 7th graders are like, you know, this tall, and they'd be like, I can't bully that. It's a baby. But you know, if like the 9th graders want to bully the 7th graders, they're 12th graders being like, hey, leave that kid alone. And so it was actually really nice for my school that way.
That's kind of smart. I like that. I like that it worked that way.
So
go.
We're going to get this question, so I'm going to ask it to you.
Yeah.
Then we've got lines, so we probably ought to
do the lines.
But they're going to ask, since we brought up films, what is the status of any potential film properties? Now, I don't want to imply that a book has to go to film to make itself. The book is an awesome form, and you don't have to have a film. But people are going to ask, we're at a MediaCon, and they're legitimately curious. So, film properties?
Yeah, film properties. Stuff has almost happened with a lot of my stuff. The Fablehaven books almost got made a couple of times, and almost is the key word there. I learned not to rent my tuxedo for the premiere or whatever. I'm not even sure if they wear tuxedos anymore, but I probably would.
If you get invited.
But yeah, like we worked with Avi Arad, the guy that produced Spider-Man and X-Men and Iron Man. He tried to turn Fablehaven into a movie. We worked with John Stevenson, who directed Kung Fu Panda. He tried to turn Fablehaven into a movie. Again, it didn't work out. There's a new team of guys that are interested in doing preliminary work, but I don't think it's going to work out, just because I've learned that it doesn't usually. But like, if something really exciting happens, I'll put it up on my website. I mean, Candy Shop War has been optioned before by New Regency. I've made like little, you know, option money off stuff, but nothing super exciting. How about you, Sanderson?
Yeah, it's weird. I'm in the same boat. Like, I've sold basically everything, and nothing seems very close to getting made at all. We've sold Mistborn, we sold Alcatraz, we sold Legion, we sold Emperor's Soul, we sold Steelheart. All of those have had film options. None of them have yet gone anywhere. Those couple of them are still under option. You know, it's really unfair because Dashner has a movie. This is really unfair. Our mutual friend James Dashner, he has a movie. It's unfair. September. Yeah. We should all like go egg the movie theater when it comes.
No, it's good. We're happy for him. If it does, it improves our odds, right?
No, I don't really know what's going to be going on with any of my film properties. I'm hopeful, but yeah.
Give me this. So I want a fun fact. Do you have any crossover stuff between universes in your books? How much then?
So when I plotted my series, I plotted a 36-book arc across 16 worlds.
Yeah. Is this the big one right now?
Yeah, so Lantris, Mistborn's a sequel. Everything is, from the first book, there were characters that showed up in the next book and that showed up in the next series.
So you're just going to town.
So yeah, it's all connected.
So is it every single of your big adult novels?
All my big adult novels all have continuing characters hidden and embedded.
And the worlds all interlock.
And you didn't even know about this. You asked this question.
I asked it not knowing.
Yeah. So they all do interlock, and there is a story behind the story and things like that.
I asked this question because in all my stuff, I didn't even think about interlocking at first. You know what I mean? Because, you know, I made up a universe with rules, and then I made up a universe with different rules, right? For a different book. And so then fans started to say, hey, you're gonna do any, you know, crossover-y stuff? And I was like, oh man, I already shot myself in the foot with a few of these things, right? But I now am starting to do that and see the fun of it, you know, to take some races or some things.
Yeah.
And so I made my new 5 Kingdoms book has stuff where I'll cross over with Beyonders. I'll take some stuff, some of the races and some of the people will cross over in fun ways. And I did one little thing. Here's a fun fact. Okay, if you read Fablehaven, in book 2 of Fablehaven, there is a movie that Kendra and Seth go to see, and that movie is called Medal of Shame. And the premise of Medal of Shame, which is an imaginary movie, is it's a serial killer who's hunting Congressional Medal of Honor winners. Right? Doesn't exist.
It's really, really upbeat.
They didn't go to it. It's like the one the boys wanted to go to.
Okay.
And the girls talked them out of it, and they went to the romantic comedy thing. Which is my life. I think that's why I did that. and so But so in Five Kingdoms, there's a Medal of Shame T-shirt that they find in one place in the world, which is my tiny, tiny, tiny Easter egg of a tiny crossover. That's the first crossover I've ever
Man,
done.
I want to see you write a book of, a dark, gritty serial killer.
Oh my gosh! Here's the thing, I totally could. This is a true story. When I got started, I could have been you. I could have been writing huge, epic fantasy, and more serious and more adult and more like. That was what I thought I was going to do. Honestly, it's what I thought I was going to do. And like my dark side is like way dark. You just get little glimpses of it in Fablehaven, but there are glimpses of it. Like I've got this, and you get some good. If you read Beyond Earth 3, you get some decent glimpses of it. But life took me in a different path. Like I went down the Harry Potter road and I found this really happy place where I was like, oh, okay, I can still make it really imaginative and really fun, but I'll reign in the darkness, and that's where I'm at right now. But maybe someday.
What are you saying about me? I could have been you. I could have been evil in the dark. No, you're mistaking me for Wells, Dan Wells.
No.
The evil dark stuff.
I know you're not Stephen King, but I wouldn't have been super evil or super dark.
Oh, okay.
Not like Dan Wells. Right, but more epic is what I was going for.
It's kind of interesting. Like Shannon Hale, she submitted Goose Girl to Tor, which is an epic fantasy publisher, and to a bunch of publishers. You can ask her about that. And it wasn't until she submitted to someone else. I think it may have been Bloomsbury. Someone said, "Hey, this should really be a teen book. We should be doing this as teen." And Dan, who we just mentioned, his first book was epic fantasy. It's interesting that a lot of people were writing epic fantasy and then ended up in teen and middle grade. And I think it might be because that era of really exciting stuff was happening there. That's the Harry Potter and the time when Garth Nix was doing all his cool stuff, and he still is doing cool stuff. But I mean, Sabriel and things, and the YA field in the late '90s, early 2000s had all this awesome imaginative stuff. And I think it may have, captured a few of those potential epic fantasy writers in embryo who went over and said, "Wow, this is awesome."
It might have.
We really ought to get to these. Look at these. Look how long these lines are.
Go.
Okay. What should we do? One and then one like that?
Yeah.
Okay. So over here first.
Okay, my question is for Brandon Sanderson. What was the most difficult magic system you made up and the easiest?
Oh, most difficult and easiest. Ooh, I've got a couple of ways I can answer this because there are different challenges to each one. Easiest was probably Alcatraz. Alcatraz, because Alcatraz, if you haven't read it, it's based off of people having superpowers, whose powers are stupid things my family and I do. And so, for instance, there's somebody, and this is me, I was so worried because I'm late to everything. I was late today, but then the panel was late. His superpower is being late to things, so when he'll arrive late magically, like someone shoots at him, he arrives late to the bullet right before it hits, and that sort of stuff. So that was just, I'm really bad at dancing, so there's someone who's magically bad at dancing. That was really easy and very, very, very quick. Allomancy was actually also very easy, meaning when I had the idea, I'm like, that's bizarre, and then I started writing it, and it just happened. It just flowed together and started working. Hardest was probably working with the Wheel of Time magic. Because the Wheel of Time, I wanted to be respectful of Robert Jordan, but I also, I do magic in a certain way, and I had to spend a lot of time thinking about how am I going to hybridize and blend doing his story and his magic in a way that is the way I like to do it as well. And so you ended up with kind of this really, when you read those books, the way the magic works is one of those things where you can see the blend of us together in a really interesting way. But that took a lot of work.
All right, so my question is how do you get the ideas for things like allomancy and the worlds that you come up with? Is it usually just a light bulb moment, or do you usually draw inspiration from somewhere else?
Mull, how do you come up with your worlds?
For world building for me, I have mostly started with a place, which is weird. Like for me, like with Fablehaven, I thought, the first idea was, what if there were secret wildlife parks for magical creatures? And then I began asking all the what-if questions that accompany that thought, right? So first you have the original thought, and then the what-if questions are, what kind of creatures would live there, and who'd want to harm them, and who'd want to help them, and what keeps them from devouring each other, and what if when the really powerful ones break loose, or why don't people know about this place? And you start answering all those questions. And if I can answer them in a satisfactory way that seems cool and fits, it starts to suggest other ideas, right?
For me, a lot of my magic systems and worlds have their feet in science. I read a lot of popular science articles and things like this. I started my college career as a chemist, and I love magic systems that have 1 foot in science and 1 foot in superstition. Really what I'm doing is I'm taking worlds and saying, there's a new branch of science, how does it work? And so the number one thing for sparking ideas is science for me. But the other big thing is I'm always looking for actually interesting limitations. Interesting things that would make a magic system hold back, what would make it not work. And these often spark the cooler magic systems than the ones that are like, what's a cool power? All right.
Yeah, so placing limits helps you, right? Placing limits to it.
Those Alcatraz's biographies, which were released under my name, I'm steward of them in the Hushlands, and I have resold them to Tor Books after buying them back last year from the publisher. And they are being re-released with new art, and we're doing interior art and a map and all that stuff next year, starting in April. Hopefully, we will have the 5th one out at around that time.
Thank you.
Very nice. Okay, and I'm in this room next, right? Okay, so we've got about 10 more minutes up. We'll keep doing questions, but I will announce I have a solo panel in here next where I will be doing mostly readings. So I'll take a few more questions then, but I'm going to be reading to you from Firefights, the sequel to Steelheart, among other things. So, yeah.
My question is for Sanderson too. When is the next Elantris book coming out?
When's what?
The second Elantris book.
The next Elantris book?
Yes.
So, let me run down the big old list. So, I have just finished Firefight, the sequel to Steelheart. My next project will be the Rhythmatist 2. And then it will be Stormlight 3. Trying to start Stormlight 3 sometime in the fall for either, if I'm really on the ball, we can get it out fall of next year. They're big books. I can't put them out every year, but every 18 months to 2 years is when I'll put them out. The next project after that will probably be Calamity, the 3rd and final book of Steelheart, followed by probably Shadows of Self, the sequel to Aluevla. So that's like my next 3 or 4 years. If we're going to see any Elantris, it's going to be another short story like The Emperor's Soul, which was a short in the Elantris world. I can't promise anything newer than that. Same goes for Warbreaker. I did write a sequel to Legion, which is my detective novella. That one will be coming out later this year.
Okay, I guess my question is not really a question, but my daughter saved the money, do everything to get you guys' books. And I've been following Brandon Mull. Every Costco he goes, we're the first ones in line, he signed our book. But Brandon Sanderson, this is a beg for a mother. My daughter brought her books and she will make me follow you till the end of your life, till you find her books. This is just a beg. Can you please sign her books so she can be happy?
Yeah, I can totally sign books, yes. In fact, I do have a signing today, and I'll try to sign some books in between panels. I can't promise I'll get to all of them. In fact, I'm sure I can't get to all of them, but I do have a signing, and it's at the Shadow Mountain booth, which is in row 1800. And where's my assistant? Kara, are you here?
I'm here.
It's at 2:30. It's at 2:30 at booth 1800. So I'm happy to sign all the books then, and I'll just sign until people's books are all signed. And I'll try to grab a few in between. I will make sure right after this panel to come down and get your daughter's books. But then we'll do most of them at 2:30. Okay?
Thank you very much.
And I will see you at Costco next time.
Okay, so my question's for Brandon Mull. What books do you ever reread your own books? And if so, what's the book you reread the most, and how many times have you read it?
Okay, so after I publish a book, I have reread that book like between 10 and 25 times, right? So the book that I've reread the most, it was all pre-publication, was Beyonders 3, because it was my most complicated, kind of my most epic, and it had a lot of payoffs I had to pay off. After I've published a book, I don't go back and read them, because I have it like half memorized, like a movie I've seen a million times, right? I've gone back and read Candy Shop War to refresh myself when I wrote the second Candy Shop War, but for the most part, I don't read my books. My personal favorites are Fablehaven 4 and 5 or Beyonders 3, the big climax books of my big series.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, good question.
Hi, my name is Ben. For both of you, when you're during your writing process, do you find yourself making choices while the character's a story based on your fears or how your fans will receive the story or characters?
Oh. Okay, so how much do we think of the fans, or how much do we think of our own fears? Which way?
Either?
Either? Both? For me, I think of all my characters are some extension of me to some degree. Like, I put my head in their head and try to think how they would act given the person I've set up, right? And so I can't help from borrowing to some degree on things that I'm scared of or things that bother me. Like, I look to my own heart to create other hearts, if that makes sense, right? So there's little pieces of me. As far as how fans will receive it, it's mostly reining in, keeping it not too gory, so that if a 5th grade class read it, they wouldn't like have their minds blown by brain matter on the walls or something. You know what I mean? Sanderson.
I generally am not thinking too much of fan reaction, because I realized there's a big danger in this when I was working on the Wheel of Time books, which, you know, I felt a very big debt to the fans. I felt like the fans owned that series more than I did, and and so as I was approaching it, I had that very much in my head, and I realized that if I let the fan in me dominate too much, the book would be full of cameos and in-jokes, rather than being this sort of the book it needed to be. And so, at the same time, as a writer, you're always thinking about audience. I don't just write for myself. I do write for my audience. And so the audience as a whole, like, I can't surprise myself with a cool plot twist, but I can surprise the audience, hopefully. And so it's there and it's not there. It's me trying to craft a story to produce certain emotions and certain experiences for fans, yet at the same time, my fears of how fans react is not something that necessarily is driving me.
Thank you. Every now and then I'll write something, I'll be like, ooh, they're gonna hate this. but also, if they're supposed to hate it, that's a good thing. You know what I mean? I think we are about out of time.
I think she said we had 3 minutes.
How are we?
So we probably do one more or so.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. My name's Sam. My question is for Brandon Sanderson. The other day I finished Words of Radiance and immediately started going through withdrawal. So I checked your website, I'm like, there's gotta be something else, you know? So I read the excerpt with Stick, that was pretty great. And I was looking over your bio, and I noticed that you spent 2 years in Seoul.
I did?
I did too, about 2 years after you.
Okay.
So I was thinking, I wonder how this influenced his writing, his character development, you know, how much of that experience is in your writing? Thank you.
Yeah, so quite a bit of that experience. I think that living in another culture just forces you to learn to think differently, and it's something that I really think everyone should try. You can't, you know, we tend to be in the middle of the United States, somewhat insulated, because the country is so big, and our population, like in Utah and Nebraska, where I grew up, both places are somewhat homogeneous. And so going somewhere else and living in a place where you are the outsider, where you are the different one, was really helpful for me in understanding. And also, the culture is awesome, and the language is awesome. And so learning these things helped build this fascination for world building, for other cultures, and things like that has driven a lot of my writing. And you can find the Korean roots in a lot of the languages I've invented for different books that I've worked on.
That's awesome. Quite team.
Cool.
I think we have time for another one.
Okay.
Sweet. My question is, when you guys are creating a book, creating new characters, do you have a formula, or like, what do you do for your characters that, like, what do you follow? What's your formula? What's your thing that makes them good and unique and awesome?
Okay, create the characters. I don't have a formula for characters. This is the hard one for me, because for plot and for setting, I have certain things I follow. For character, it's a matter of I just cast someone in a role and I start writing them, and until I write through their eyes, I don't know who they are. And it's more by instinct and by gut, so it's very hard to explain. Though I do have some resources for writers. I teach a university course, How to Write Science Fiction and Fantasy, down at BYU, and I post those lectures online. And so you can find them on YouTube or on my website. We have just the full university lecture series, and I talk for about 3 hours on character, and that'll be more helpful for you. The other thing that I do is I have a podcast called Writing Excuses, which is 15 minutes, 15 minutes a week. It's if you've never done a podcast, you don't have to do anything special. You just go to the website and you push play, and it plays. You don't have to like download it or anything. It's just Google Writing Excuses. It's writingexcuses.com, and you can look by topic and find the character topics and listen to us talk about it, and you'll get a lot more information that way.
Awesome. And for me with character, I try to put I guess I'm looking for people that interest me, right? And I'm looking for people that I can relate to in some way, and I'm also trying to, what's my core principle? I'm looking for a few defining features that I can have be governing principles for that character. For me, it helps to make a character if I know a few extraordinary things, like they're really brave or really cowardly, or
the backpack.
Yeah, the backpack full of stuff. If he has the backpack full of stuff, yeah, that is a good characteristic.
No, that's the sort of thing that I will look for. Is like, how does this person react to trouble? I reach into my backpack. That's actually, you can write one sentence. They've got something in their backpack. Or how do they react to trouble? They punch it. Like, how does this person react to trouble?
Yeah.
You can define your characters often by things like that.
Yeah, I like that. That is very cool. But you guys, we are now out of time.
Yep,
right?
We do have time for announcements. Did you announce, do you have anything else going on?
Okay, yeah, so my next series is called 5 Kingdoms. 5 Kingdoms is a series about kids who get taken as slaves into another world and have adventures as they try to get free and get home. The world is divided into 5 kingdoms, where each kingdom has different magic that works there. And so there's a lot of discovery as we go through the 5 books. The first book has just come out. I will have a sequel series to Fablehaven starting in 2016. It'll be called Dragon Watch. It'll be another 5 books. It'll continue the main storyline of Fablehaven with the same main characters, Kendra, Seth, and everybody. I'm really looking forward to that. I did not write it immediately after the first Fablehaven series because I needed some time to figure out some new adventures that seemed cool. So 2016, 17, 18, 19, and 20 will be those 5 books. So 5 Kingdoms and that are what I have coming, and I will be signing right now at the Shadow Mountain book booth. I will be there starting at 1, and that is at row 1800. If you would like to see me or get a book signed, come say hi. I'll probably be there for a while, like an hour or 2 or something. Okay? Okay,
and I will be in this room doing readings from probably Shadows of Self and Legion 2 and from Firefight, and then I'll be signing at 2:30 at the same booth in 1800.
Cool, thank you guys for your questions. Sorry, I'll answer yours, thank you.